Okay. Think we're live now. Great. Let me just hear if the sound is okay. Waiting for the delay. Let's get to... Yeah, welcome to the live stream. I cannot hear anything. Yeah, okay, I can hear myself. That's great. Welcome to today's stream. Gonna follow up on this week's video. It was a little bit of experience to release it and see what happened. I think I can see these out anyway. One second. Here we go. So yeah, stop that. Anyway, welcome to today's video and our live stream. Just go over a few things. Let's get into that. Let's get started. So today's stream, I like to do an agenda because that's the kind of person I am. So I'll talk about a little bit of I've made a guide on how to start on with Martinus world picture. So I'll just say a few words about that one, and then there's this week's video on about truth. Two different types of truth, relative and absolute. Two different views, complementary. So that's all good. But I'll talk about that one, and then I'll have this. Maybe I should call it status or the channel since last time, something like that. But there are some words about the channel. I'd like to talk about that. So that's all good. I will do one thing though. Try to do this. Don't expect 100, 1,000 of people looking into this. So let's take it from there and do like this. Let's see if that makes a difference. Does not. Sorry about this. Yeah, okay. At least that looked like a better number. Anyway, just gonna go over it. So let's start. Something about how it changes. Anyway, I made a newsletter. I hope to get some subscribers at some point. And if you sign up for it, I've made a guide on how to start reading and go into Martinus world picture in general, where you can start. Especially if you're an English speaker, it's a little bit more limited than if you're Dane. Martinus was Danish, so all the original work is in Danish, his lectures and all that. But some of it has been translated, which is really, really great. But yeah, so keeps doing things. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so all his work is in Danish, and some of it has been translated, which is great. And there's some words on where to get started, which book you can read, and which one are actually, yeah, translated. So things about that, the online resources, study groups, Martinus Center in Denmark, Copenhagen, and Martinus Institute in Copenhagen, and Martinus Center in Klint, which is also located like 1 or 2 hours from Copenhagen, depending on how you get there. by car or by public transportation. Anyway, I've made this. I should put it in the description, which I will do now. There we go. So feel free to subscribe for that one. I will post about the videos and other stuff in the newsletter going forward. I have to find some good value in it, but we are not there yet. Anyway, so that was briefly on that. I will link it in different places so people can see it and all that. So that's all good. It's up and running. So here we have this week's video. So let's get a link to that one. There we go. So yeah, I wanted to make a video about what truth is in Martinus' world picture, basically. And he's operating with two different ones, an absolute or relative truth. So that's what the video is all about. And let's just briefly go over it. Essentially, I wanted to make a shorter video than it actually turned out to be, but you gotta learn, right? So the idea is essentially to describe what Martinus' analysis of the living being is, and then take it as an example of the two different views on the truth, or two different types or categories of truth. Yeah, I start to introduce the living being as an example. I use the example as you have two different views, where you have the viewer, the observer of reality, or the perceiver, as something absolute or something relative. I believe I have. Don't know why it won't do that. So let's start with the analysis of the living being. And essentially, Martinus analyzes it into that we have three principles going on here. We have the I, we have the ability to create, and we have the created or the matter. And essentially what we have here is that we have this I that can sort of, that's where the free will come. It's not concrete, but it's sort of setting the direction for the living being. And then we have that I has an ability to create and perceive. And then there is the created, which is the thing that's actually being changed or perceived, where the I has the ability to perceive this created, changed thing that changes, right? And the idea is you can take one of them out and you don't have a living being anymore. And briefly, if you have an I without the ability, well, you have an ability to create and create it, but you don't have the I, so you don't have this steering or directing thing in the living being, so there won't be any movement, right? If you don't have something that moves thing. And if you have something that can actually set a direction, but you don't have the ability to actually manifest it or actually get it into the real world, but you have a real world, but you cannot change the real world, then there's nothing as well. And if you have something that can set a direction and you have the ability to create, but you don't have something to change, then you don't have anything as well. So that's sort of the analysis very briefly. So that's the first part of the video. And then I use this one, which is also a very simple drawing as well, but it's the same three principles, right? So you have the viewer here, which I say is the I, which is actually not viewing anything as an I in itself, but this is actually the ability to view or create. And this is sort of what are we looking at? What is actually the perceived thing? So the idea here is to say, okay, so if you have a materialistic point of view, you will say, well, the viewer is part of the created. That becomes one thing, right? Because we cannot If you don't have the ability to perceive it, you don't see the eye and the ability to create. It becomes part of the physical world, essentially. That's the next video about that, the one that comes out in the next week. So yeah, so the idea here is simply, if you have something you perceive as relative or is relative, if you measure something moving with something moving, or anything at all that is moving, this view in the middle here is changing. So if you can imagine this view, let's say it goes up and down just in a symbolic way, the view on the object is changing. I'm sure you can, I think I'll make some good drawings on that at some point. That is maybe a little bit misleading, but that's the whole idea, right? So if you have something you want to measure, but the thing you measure with is essentially changing, then the measurement you get is changing. So if you see the eye in the living being as something that is changing, or perceive it as something that is changing, it is something that is changing, then the thing you view is perceive will be changing as well. So the perception of a thing, the perception of truth, will be relative in the sense that it's changing depending on the viewer, right? So the idea in absolute terms is that we see the viewer or the eye as an absolute fixed point. Absolute fixed point is what Martinus calls it. So in that case, this becomes unchanging. So the view on the viewed will also be absolute in a way. It won't change, right? Maybe what you view is changing, but that's because the truth out here, or whatever you're perceiving, will be changing, but not the observer itself. So in that case, you start to have to work with something absolute, and that's also where the absolute truth come in, which is a thing that the absolute truth is something that has never started and will never end. So it's there all the time. It's internal, basically, right? So whereas the relative truth is something that is temporary, it starts at some point and it ends at some point, because the thing you're measuring it with, you're observing it with, and the truth itself is changing. Doesn't mean it doesn't. I mean, it still has value and all that. It's not that. It's just what kind of category does it have. That's the important thing here. So so we have two different views, where you can be in a mode where things are absolute, and another mode where another analysis where it's relative. And that's also where it goes with what I've already hinted at, that you can have a relative truth which is changing all the time. Essentially, maybe so little that it doesn't seem like it's changing, but it's essentially changing all the time. And then you have the absolute truth, which is something that's eternal and never changes. And I used you can say the analysis of the living being as an example of something that is absolute truth, just due to the fact that the arguments I gave 5 minutes ago, where you cannot take one of the three principles out of the living being, because then you don't have a living being. Then there's something about whether it's eternal and things. But anyway, it's the idea here is that analysis of the living being is always there. That's eternal in the sense that that analysis never changes. There are details in it, and of course you can make another drawing of this, but the idea behind it, with having these three principles, will be the same, and has always been the same, and will always be the same, right? It's not like an eternal truth start at some point and end at some other point. It's there forever. And maybe I should just post my video about eternal. not that one. It's not that one. It's not that one. It's this one. So that's the video about the kernel. There we go. Cool. So so that's an eternal truth. It has always been there, and it will always be there. Whereas if you see the living being as something physical, then the eye and the ability to create and the created will change, right? So if you see the living being, for instance, as a human being, I mean, that's one way of describing it, but that human being has started at some point, and at some point there won't be that human being again. And then you can, of course, make it a more general thing that human beings are living beings, which is, of course, correct. But if you say a human being, if you state that as a truth, that living being is the same as a, I mean, you need some general things, right? Forget about that one. It became a little bit weird. Anyway, if you have something changing, that's essentially it. If your view on what is a living being is changing, then you are into the relative and the detail part, and it's not eternal, right? If you say, oh, it has to be able to breathe, or it has to consist of 50% water, or whatever, right? Then that's not always the case for a living being, I assume. But with these three things, it's always the case. That's the idea here. Anyway, so I go into that video, in the video in more details and a bit better than I do right now. And why it matters, why is this important? That's important because how do I do this? I'm not friends with Tobias right now. Anyway, why it matters? It matters because yeah, I talk about if we have some common understanding on what the world is, we might be better to tolerate each other and understand each other. It's like we don't discuss whether 2 plus 2 is 4. And if we don't have to discuss what kind of living being we are and where we're coming from and where we're going, why we're here, and essentially what is up and down, right? Then we might be able to tolerate each other a little bit better, and there will be hopefully a more peaceful world. Martinus goes to the extent that he says we need to understand the spiritual part of our world and the analysis of the living being in order to actually get through all the wars and all that stuff. So that's the motivation for understanding all this. And yeah, so that's the idea here. What is this? Anyway, so yeah, enough about that. Take a look at the video. It was kind of, let's see. Yeah, so that was the whole plan. Something about moving from one slide to another. Anyway, so the idea here, well, I actually posted this video the other day, and it kind of, I won't say went viral, but a lot of people actually saw it to a channel like this one right now. It's where it is right now. More than 100 people actually saw it, like from not, I mean, you can get 100 views on a Martinus video if you post it in groups and so forth, but this was essentially from search. So it was quite nice to see that at least I have some way to go into how to actually get a video viewed. The next step is to make some videos that are so good that people want to see them, and YouTube and Google want to push them actually. But that's sort of next step, one thing at a time. So there's been some days where it was kind of interesting to get new subscribers and so forth. So that was cool. So when things get not so easy to make the videos and keep trucking, that's kind of nice to get that. Anyway, so here are some of the questions that I have picked up. Feel free to post them, especially on the videos. It actually makes a difference between that, because that's something Google actually looks at, whether people interact with the videos. They look at a lot of things, but that's one of the bigger ones, because that's something where the creator cannot do it right. So if other people actually react to a video, it means it has some kind of value. I think that's the logic here. Anyway, so if you have any questions to the videos, I will see them for sure, and I'll give them an answer. If it requires an answer, I'll just say thank you for saying thank you, or whatever it takes. So that would be really helpful. Of course, only if you want to do it. Anyway, so Q&A, is there an absolute or eternal truth? That's a really good question. Martinus will say yes. He had the ability, according to himself, that he could actually see it. It's a huge question, right? What actually establishes an absolute or eternal truth? I mean, we can say something about what it is. I think it's pretty obvious that an absolute or eternal truth has to be there forever and everywhere. It cannot have started, it cannot have an end. So it's like eternal life. You cannot be born and get eternal life. And it's the same with truth. It cannot have been created or started at some point. It has to be there all the time and everywhere. So that's sort of the characteristic of it. And how do we actually figure out whether you have that or not? I think the analysis of the living being is a pretty good example of something that is in that direction. It's really hard to see how you can have a living being. I think we should start by saying, do we have a living being in the first place? I mean, and Martinus is arguing, I mean, if you are someone who tries to argue that there is no living being, that's a proof that there is a living being, because you could not argue against having a living being without being a living being. So that's the argument, that there is a living being, and that sort of, there's these inductive proofs in math where you say we are here right now, and I guess we can agree that we have living beings, right? At least it seems like something is doing something, and that's the sign of a living being, right? And there's some logic to at least the humans and animals and so forth. It's not always great logic, but there's some thinking, right? And that's the sign of something living. So there's something living. And then the question is, has this living thing, or the living being, has it ever started? And Martinus will argue that it hasn't. And from this analysis with the three principles of free analysis, I think you can argue that it has never started, right? Martinus has a lot of arguments for that, but I think you can argue for that. And then you should ask, is it plausible? Does it make sense? Does it actually relate in a good way to what I have experienced in my own life or in your life. So that's the next step. So can you even, if it's not plausible to you, it's really hard to grasp, and it becomes kind of either naive or some kind of fantastic thing that, and not in a good way. So you don't really bother about it. You don't really care if it's not within sort of something you can relate to in and can be in some ways real to you. And we could call that being plausible. It could actually be a thing, and it sounds right, but you might not know for sure whether it's correct or not. And then the last step, and that's the real tough one, that is that you have actually convinced yourself, you have understood what it is to the best extent you can. It sounds plausible, it sounds like something that could actually be out there. And then the third step is that you have to say it cannot be in any other possible way. And that's a type of argument that Martinus is, it's used all over the place in science, but it's also used by Martinus. So he, for instance, says that there's these 6 different kingdoms that a living being goes through. I haven't talked a lot about them here on the channel, but Martinus talks quite a lot about that. And he states that for every one of them in the Book of Life, he states, if this part of being a living being wasn't here, there couldn't be any living being. You couldn't exist. And it's the same kind of argument he makes with a lot of other things, and also with the 3 principles of the living being, where he states, if this wasn't here, then the living being wouldn't be here, right? And we kind of just agreed, maybe, that living beings exists. So in that sense, so that's sort of the third step, or the last step, where, well, maybe there's a fourth one, but the third one is kind of where you have to say, okay, this is how it is, and it cannot be in any other way. And that's a really, really tough one to crack. It really makes it takes it to the next level, right? Because with the first one and the second one, where you have to understand it and you have to say, okay, this sounds reasonable, that's pretty lightweight in a way. You can just say, yeah, maybe it's correct, maybe it's not. Here you have to say, this is right, and it cannot be in any other way. So you need some way to say, this is it's indisputable in a way. You cannot get around it. It has to be like this. That's a completely different way of stating things than just saying this sounds reasonable. Yeah, it could be, maybe, who knows, right? To say, yeah, this is how it is. And Martinus states it like that a lot of times in his books, and say, this is how it is. It cannot be in any different, in any other way. It's the absolute truth, period. Boom. And then you can go through his arguments, right? That's what he's doing. He calls it, I translate it into trains of thoughts. So you get a long argument where you kind of go through it step by step, and you can do it yourself. And that's sort of where you have to understand, what is he stating, what is does this make sense, is it reasonable, plausible, all those kind of things. And at some point, when he starts stating these things, that this is how it is and it cannot be in any different way, it's not like he wants to force something on you, but it's an opportunity to actually get into his work and figure out what's up and down in these kind of things. So that's sort of the third step in this, and maybe I should make a video on this at some point. Anyway, let me just take some. So so you can say, so, but this will still be kind of theoretical in a way. Yeah, and the distinction between something theoretical and something practical here is that something theoretical is something you haven't experienced directly. It's sort of a thinking thing. So it's something you have read it, you have thought about it, and it sounds plausible, and you could even be able to do sort of the math or the arguments in it. So you can say, okay, this cannot be any different than what is described here. but you haven't really experienced it yourself, right? You have just heard that there's this thing, stars or whatever, or the earth is round, right? It's not a flat earth, it's round. I'm just picking up some example, right? And you can do the math and you can see the stars and you can kind of calculate, and it seems plausible, reasonable. You can do the numbers and it seems like the earth is round, right? But it still looks pretty flat. And it's the same in life in general. I mean, you can hear about reincarnation and eternal life and all those kind of things, but the abilities we have, most of us, at least whatever, usually people experience life as you get born at some point and you live your life and you die, and that's it, right? That's pretty much, if you have physical abilities only, then that's what you can see, right? So you haven't really experienced prior lives or something higher where you see, okay, we actually are eternal beings and all those kind of things. But that doesn't mean you cannot have a view where you kind of say, okay, it's pretty much, it sounds reasonable that we have lived a prior life and we'll have an afterlife and maybe even have lived have eternal lives, right? But you haven't experienced it. So that's the big differentiator on that. So the difference between theory and practice is that if you have understood eternal life in practice and experienced it directly, then that's sort of the fourth step, I would say, in this. Just making the steps up right now, but that's sort of the next level where you go beyond just it sounds reasonable and I cannot see it can be any other way, but you get to the point where, and Martinus talks about getting intuition and being able to see it and understand it, not just understand it actually from a theoretical point of view, but actually observe it, right? Where you experience, you can travel around the world, you go up in an airplane and you can actually see that the earth is curving, right? And you can experience the time zones and all those kind of things. Remember the first time I went to the US, right? It was the longest day in my life, right? It just went on forever because of the time zones, right? So that all points towards that the earth is not flat, but it's round, right? But back in the days, it looked pretty flat, and that was what people believed, right? Because, well, that was the experience, right? And the same probably gonna happen with our lives, right? Right now, it just looks more reasonable to many people that we have one life, because that's what we can see, right? We get born at some point and people die, and that's it. That's our experience. That's what we base our life on. But that doesn't mean it's right. So at some point we might get into this. Maybe there's more than one life. More to it. Anyway, so that would be sort of the last step in understanding that there's an absolute truth, and we are rarely there. Martinus talks about getting cosmic glimpses, and that you can actually get sort of a glimpse of this eternity, and then at a later point when we are sufficiently developed, we will actually get a permanent ability to create to perceive the absolute truth and eternal life and so forth. So is there an absolute truth? Yeah, to me it's plausible. It's reasonable to think of it in a way that it's there. I cannot say I have experienced it directly in that way. It's most of it is, I would say, is theoretical to me, and I think that's probably the case for most people in a way. And that's fine. That's not a problem. That's just where we are. So no worries. Let's go for it, right? It still makes sense to. I mean, let's say you don't believe that there's an eternal truth. So what do I actually believe in that case? Well, you don't have anything basically. That's the issue here. Because if you don't have any kind of absolute truth, well, even stating that there is no absolute truth, that's an absolute truth statement. To say that there is no absolute truth, that's an absolute. That's not like there's no exceptions, right? That's just how it is. That's how it is all the time. Maybe you can believe that it will appear at some point. I don't know, but in itself, it has this self-reflecting problem, I believe it's called. So the statement you give, there's no truth. That's a truth. It doesn't make any sense in itself. You can explain that, well, within the relative world or the relative truth, there's no absolute truth. That's actually correct. That's even an absolute truth. And that's what people say. They're just taking it a step too far and say, because I experience relative truth all the time, which we do. That's all the details in life. That's relative truth, right? And that's great. But you cannot, based on that, do sort of an, what is it called, deductive, imply that because all I see is relative, then everything is relative. That doesn't work. You cannot do that, because there can be exceptions, right? So you have to go into a place where you, and that's the point here. You have to just say, okay, there are things I don't know. I just don't. I mean, what I see seems like it's all relative. That's fine. That's actually scientific in a long way. If you say, okay, but I don't know all of it. But if you start to say, hey, all I see is relative, so everything is relative, that doesn't work. You cannot do that. Anyway, I totally lost track on everything here. So yeah, so what I tried to say is basically it's impossible, basically, I would claim, to say that there is no absolute truth, because that claim would be an absolute truth. So you can never know that there is no absolute truth. So you kind of have to be open to, I think that, you get in that there could be an absolute truth. You get in some weird logical position if you say, hey, there's no absolute truth here. That makes it weird. Anyway, so I think I'll just leave it at that. Huh. Can we experience truth? I just talked about that. I think most of what we experience is relative in a way, and that's a relative truth, and that is a truth. It is reality. What we experience, it's just our own truth. It's our own subjective or relative truth. What I experience right now, standing here and talking, that's relative. There's some absolutes behind it, but looking on the screen and so forth is it's all relative, right? It's all details in the big thing. But yeah, as I said, Martinus claims that he could actually see it with this intuitive ability, and we'll get as well. That's what he says. So it's not exclusive. It's not like he really did not want to be something special. He said everyone will be like me. It's not like he was. He was like a older brother or something. I've heard from people who knew him, and great uncle or something like that. He didn't walk around trying to be something more than everyone else, although he kind of was. But the main idea here was that, is that we can all get there. That's the idea. Yeah, so is it science? That's a pretty big one, because just a discussion on what science is in the first place. Some people think that science is all about physical or materialistic research, and science is way more than that. Um, we also have humanities and social sciences and all that, and in those areas we are actually getting, especially philosophy, we are getting pretty close to something um, where this could apply as something that is, yeah, some kind of truth, right? And I'm trained in theory of science, but I'm not an expert, so I will take some. I don't want to claim too much here, but what I think is interesting in the first place is to figure out what. I mean, Martinus claims it's science, so what does he actually mean by science? On what terms does he claim that this is science? I think that's a first step, and that's not that easy to figure out because he doesn't have like a chapter where he describes it. Maybe it's really simple and I just haven't seen it yet, but I actually spent quite a lot of time trying to figure out what he thinks about it, what science is, and he kind of gives a hints. Again, it's not like he has a chapter about why this is science, but he kind of has some books where he write. There's one, what is truth, I would translate it to. What is truth essentially, and it's about. I mean, I was coming as an academic, and okay, so what's your scientific method and what's your ontology and your worldview and all those kind of things, and it's about. I mean, it's still about truth and what it is, but it's not like. I mean, it's not an academic. Right, it's not academic writings he has done, right? So it's not like you can just, you don't get it served on a silver plate, let me put it that way. But I'm pretty sure it's in there. He wasn't trained in writing science in that way or anything, so uh, it makes sense. But it's not written like that. He's, yeah. Anyway, but it's in there, and it's in weird comments here and there where he talks about something completely different, and then he just goes into a sentence, a half sentence, or something he just put in there, just oh yeah, because blah blah blah, and then he kind of reveals a lot about what he thinks about science. So my project has been to put those kind of things together and try to make a cohesive picture of what Martinus could have been thinking when he says it's science, because he calls it spiritual science, Martinus spiritual science, something like that. Anyway, so how does he claim that? That's one of the questions I want to answer, and making this channel and all those things is part of it, because yeah, it's kind of the main point in doing this channel as well. The main point with the channel is essentially to try to make Martinus' work accessible in a different way for English speaking people. Take people on a journey, hope some people will join and be interested, and put some questions in the comments and so forth, and take it from there and see what happens. Anyway, enough about that. So is it science? Martinus definitely claims it's science. What are normal scientists claims it's science? Some of them would definitely not. Some of them would not care at all. It's not my business. I don't have any expertise in this area, so I don't want to deal with it at all. That's a fine point of view. Or even say it's scientific in a weird way. And then you have maybe an area where it could be interesting. There's the one where you're into more religious things, where you kind of have them sort of out here so you can actually study the organization or whatever, right? As a spiritual society, but that's not what we're talking about here. This is the content of what Martinus has done or written about. Is that scientific or not? It's not so much whether how things are organized or something like that. So yeah, Martinus claims it's science, and most scientists would probably say this is not science. Just the fact that it's not academic writing kind of disqualified it in some ways, which is that's just how it is. It doesn't makes it wrong. It doesn't make it untruth or anything. It can definitely be a perfect description of truth without being like academically considered as something you can use as science. But yeah, anyway. So some thoughts about the channel. That was last week's video, basically. Go and watch it. I think I have more points in there. Tried to make it short, didn't work. Tried to make next week's video short, hasn't worked either. The video, not that comes out in a couple of days, but the week after that has to be short, because then I have to try to make a shorter one, make it more concise and things. Anyway, enough self-criticism on this channel. Yeah, so what I already said, made our how to get started with Martinus world picture is pretty straightforward. Well, I think it's kind of useful. If you haven't heard anything about it, it's just the very basics stuff. What books has he written? What can you read in English? There's an institute, there's a homepage where you can get information and so forth. I think it's kind of a useful start, actually, if you don't know anything about it and you want to know more about Martinus' works. So this is the page. I've already put it in there in the chat. Then I have a new bookcase. It's not that far behind me as it looks on the screen, but it's there. And I even got some books in there. It's my Martinus books. I'll get some more stuff, some different lighting. Right now it's really, really bright, all of it. Strip. See if I can make it blue. I cannot see it. Yeah, then it became a little bit more blue, right? Now it's almost off. Yeah, just a little bit. You can see it in there. I'll make it more blue. Anyway, so yeah, just to have a little bit more to look at in the background. And that was some feedback I got. Also, when you watch YouTube videos about how to do this, they also say make something in the background, and hey, I have to do one thing at a time. It's not there. Pretty okay with that so far. Need something on top here. I'm actually standing up, so it's fairly high, but I like it how it is so far. It's a step in the right direction. Anyway. Cringe factor. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. It still feels really not so good when I launch the videos, but I guess that's just how it is, and that's just how it's gonna stay for a little bit longer. I really try to. I learn something every time I put out a video, so that's that. It's still fun. Well, fun. It's a nice process, and I'm trying to challenge how I do things and get better at it. And I think I I see things now that I didn't see like a month ago, and I just keep shrugging basically. And you can think a lot about how to do things and what is right and wrong, and there's this you want people to see it and things, and another part of me don't want people to see it because I still think some of it is not great and so forth, but you learn, right? So that's cool. Some plans for September. I think I spoke about it last week as well. I think I can sell a lot right now. I don't know how many is still hanging out here. It's been a while. I'll market, do some little bit of marketing. I haven't done that at all so far. Just spoke to a couple of friends about it. So next step is, since there are some Martinus Facebook groups and things, I have some stuff on my own. Most of it is in Danish, but I will start posting a little bit. I have Instagram account. Let me post that as well here. Instagram. Here we go. So yeah, I think Instagram will be my thing. I hope this new thread thing they have created will come here. Maybe I should go for Twitter, but I have to build it from scratch anyway. I think Instagram is, I'm not so much into Facebook, but anyway, maybe we'll end up there anyway. Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, I might post some shorts as well next week. From next week on. So I think that potentially could be something every day. That's sort of of course you plan it in advance, so you don't have to sit every day and do something. But that's probably, I'll see if I can do that. Anyway, new color palette. Might have seen the colors change a little bit. And if this wanna change slight. There we go. I don't know why this image is not sharp, but anyway, just copy pasted a part of my screen. Anyway, so this is the 4 colors I will use. I'm colorblind, so I don't care. I just stick to the same colors. I need to talk to someone soonish about these colors before I change everything. But what I essentially did is that I took a palette generator, put in the main symbol of Martinus. He has 100 symbols, and one of them is his main one, and I just put it in there, and these 4 colors came out, and that's what I'm sticking to for now. And if something's better than me at colors, come and say use these 4 or 5 colors, then I might do that. I think I need maybe a more bluish one. I just like the more, I mean, if my wall will probably be all neon, sort of these lights you have on buildings and so forth, where really it becomes a lot for non-colorblind. So I cannot pick my own colors because it becomes too crazy, and I know that, so I don't do that. Anyway, yeah, so still going kind of strong. Small things here and there. I might get some time off, so I will actually look into trying to get the process nailed down so I can actually, yeah, get up to speed on creating things, so I can do it rather quickly in a way, or improve the quality. Basically, I still think there's quite a lot of work to do on quality. So the ambition is still there. I did some work on sort of what is the value and the purpose of the channel, and I think that I'm fairly happy with that. So I just have to master the how to do good videos, which is pretty critical if you want to do a YouTube channel. But hey, gotta start somewhere. So I think I'm just gonna end it here. It has been almost an hour, and I have, who knows, maybe someday that will be a little bit more. I stick to these so far because I think it's also a way to practice just being in front of the camera, and why not? It takes a couple of hours that I probably could use on making better videos or something else, but so far I'm just gonna try everything out and see what sticks. So that's what I'm doing here, and I think I will just say thanks for watching, and the video that comes out in a couple of days will be on materialism, the meaning of that from a spiritual point of view, which is, again, it became one video that probably should have been 3 videos, and that's just stupid that I cannot figure that out yet. But it just occurred to me when I actually recorded it yesterday, and it just became pretty obvious to me that, and the same goes with the video that came out this week, I should have turned it into 3 videos. But that's what you learn, right? So so that's fine. I mean, I could have made 2 videos probably in the same time, and they would have, both of them would have been better than one that came out. So, but that's the learning experience, and might need to get some better feedback at some point. So need someone who knows, or some people who knows how to do it well. That's the next step. Well, that's not the next step. As long as I know quite a lot about how to improve it myself, I will keep doing that. And there's a lot of information out there on how to do things. But I think the issue by doing so much on my own right now is that I have to learn it the hard way sometimes. I have to realize that, okay, that wasn't a great idea. Or maybe I spent time and energy on something that doesn't give a lot of bang for the money, so to speak. But hey, this is a hobby. This is for fun. This is for communicating a message that maybe some people could use. So that's why I'm doing it, and we'll just see what happens. YouTube is a long-term game. It's 1 to 2 years. It's 100 videos before I get good, right? And I'm at number 9, so there's a long, and I don't think I'm that much above average. It will take me a while. No reason to be expecting something else. And yeah, we'll just take it from there, see what happens. Anyway, I just keep talking. For some reason, I just felt it could be fun to reach an hour, and we're not there yet. So what else to talk about? Yeah, I might have a period of time where I get some more time to optimize things. So I'll spend some time on doing the videos, obviously, but I will also get an overview of the steps I need to get through or go through to do a video, and try to optimize them as much as possible. Right now, I start from scratch every time I had to edit a video, and I know there are ways to do things so it becomes so much easier, and I want to spend some time on that just to, yeah, if I could, maybe I could speed it up to double up, something like that. That's my expectation, basically. Better and faster. That's the idea. And better means better quality, right? So it should be fine even for the viewers, but it's just, I know I can get into a situation work-wise where I might not have as much time or energy as I have right now. and that's just, I want to prepare for that so I can sustain this. I've been doing Ironman triathlon, which was 2 training passes every day, 7 days a week, year in, year out. So I know I can do that. I know I can sustain that. But I mean, if I can make it easier for myself and I can actually do this in this, I mean, when I did the triathlon thing, if I had to go 6 hours or 7 hours on the bike on a Sunday, it took 6-7 hours. There was nothing I could do about that. But here I can actually improve on the process, and I can even delegate some of it. I'm not gonna do that right now, but some of the YouTubers, the big YouTubers, actually say, "Hey, get someone to edit your movies," right? But I'm not there yet. I want to learn something myself. I want to know what it is, and I don't want to be dependent on someone else. But I also want to make a system or a way so the channel isn't depending so much on me that I need to do everything on my own. I want to put in some systems where I can actually say, hey, you want to help out with planning the videos, scripting the videos, maybe even shooting them at some point, but at least editing, the marketing part, all those kind of things. I call it marketing. I don't know what else to call it, but just put things on social media and write newsletters and those kind of things, right? These are also things that goes into it, and if you want to succeed, you have to spend some time on that, and things has to be pretty decent, because it's there are pros out there who has done this for a long time, know what they're doing, and got a well-oiled machinery up and running, and I just don't have that right now. So I need to, what I have is some knowledge about what Martinus has written, and I'm just trying to package it in a way so it gets accessible for more people. That's the whole idea. Trying to get people into, make it relevant. If people don't care, that's perfectly fine. They shouldn't invest anything in it, time, whatever. Okay, enough rambling. Time to take the next step for today, and as I always say, I will stick to this. I'll put something up next week, and we'll see what happens. Yeah, have a good one. Bye.